Welcome to the International Classroom, a podcast for educators living and working in the UAE. In today's episode, we'll be delving into a topic that's essential for any teacher's professional development: goal setting. Whether you're a seasoned teacher or just starting out in your career, setting and reflecting on goals can help you grow and thrive in your role. As educators, setting goals is crucial for our professional growth and success in the classroom. However, it can be challenging to set and achieve goals amidst the demands and pressures of teaching. In this episode, we'll be sharing strategies for setting effective and attainable goals, as well as tips for staying motivated and on track, from SMART goals to goal tracking and reflection. So, whether you're looking to improve your teaching skills, take on a new leadership role, or simply find more balance in your personal and professional life, this episode is for you. Let's get started. Talking about
They're the best ones. They're the best ones.
That was it when Kerry said she actually listened to them, and I even made a comment about one of them going off on a tangent, and she was like, and it's like, well, you can tell you've not listened to any of them.
Yeah. I was actually sat on the plane listening to that. When I was on the plane, I was listening, and I was like, oh, this is good. This is like she's doing it. And then you said, oh, we go off on tangents all the time. And she was like, what? Yeah. And you literally said that. Yeah. That was
my
good.
wife, ever supportive, but now she's gone off and listened to them actually.
Has she?
Yeah.
I did she gave me a little shout out at the end. Like, sorry, Drew. I was like, don't apologise. You're doing me a favour, mate.
Speaking of the back, you're back.
I'm back. Yeah.
How have you been?
It's been. I've actually had a lovely half-term break of doing not much. Just getting my head back in being in Dubai, back in. For those of you who missed me, I was traveling for a while. Some stuff back in the UK, and now here we are. Yeah. And we are back to action. You've been busy. Loads of guest speakers, and it's been
I've had to fill the void, fill the time and spaces.
I've got to say, some people, the people you've had on have got a lot more interesting things to say than I do, more often than not.
It's niche. It's just niche that, areas of specialty.
Yeah, I mean, it's been wonderful. So, hi everyone.
I've had all the students in school asking, when's Mr. Owen coming back? Can you ask Mr. Owen if he remembers me? Can you ask him? It's like, sir, can you give me a shout out on your podcast? Do you ever?
I get that a lot. Sir, you've not been on the podcast and we've been waiting for you. Like, yeah, guys, just relax. I've been busy marking all your exams.
Been in exactly the same boat. Assessment week.
Yeah. Assessment week's been good. So
onward from assessment week follows reports, and then reports follows parents' meetings, and into the business end of the year, isn't it? For exams, GCSEs.
It's the downhill slope now. It kind of feels like the slip and slide to the end of the year.
I wouldn't call it that.
Yeah, I love it. I love this bit now. Because everything's so bam, 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 bam.
This is true.
Everything is so quick. We've actually got a trip in 2 weeks as well to South Africa. So that's another week.
What's that for?
That is a geography trip, and it is extremely related to the content that we teach at GCSE geography.
Oh, nice.
We're going and looking at the Anglo-Boer War and the history behind it. We're going to some memorials, so links to the history stuff there.
Whereabouts in South Africa is that?
Nambiti. So we're going to the Nambiti Game Reserve. It's kind of southeast.
I only did a rugby tour. We did a rugby tour there. My first year of teaching. I was 22. A 3-week rugby tour with the
students, with the boys.
Students. Yeah. First 15 team to South Africa.
How was it?
Amazing.
Yeah?
Yeah. My first ever time to South Africa, we did Cape Town, Bloemfontein, Sun City. And schools, like the boys were billeted for a lot of the time. And I remember this story, and there's a photo around somewhere, that one of our boys got billeted out to a family who owned a big cat farm.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And we were based in, this was grammar school from Birmingham actually. So one of these boys who was like an Indian boy, and there's a photo of him next to a cheetah, because the cheetah lived in the house with the family. But the funniest part was that this boy was like, oh no, I'm vegetarian. And the South African was like, oh, okay, so you don't eat beef? And he was like, no, I'm vegetarian, so I don't. And he's like, yeah, you don't eat beef, but you eat chicken,
fish.
Yeah. It's like, no. Then it's on back and forward. I had to explain to him, but that'll be nice.
Yeah, that'll be really good. We are looking forward to it. It's been taking a fair bit of planning.
I can imagine,
especially the visas. Something, if anyone's thinking about coming out to Dubai, moving to Dubai, and you are really excited about getting students to be involved with extracurricular things like trips, like especially going to other countries, because the theory is that when you move out here, all the students have got more money, so you can do more elaborate trips. That's the initial outset that I thought, a misconception. Yeah. That's how I thought when I moved out here. But that's sadly not always the case. But when you do get the trips to go ahead, there's also the issue of certain passports having trouble finding visas and things like that, depending where you're going. So I've actually been on the phone to the consulate quite a few times this week. The South African government, me.
You all right,
mate? It's me again. So that's been nice.
You know, have you seen, was it Lethal Weapon?
Okay.
Well, I'm going to explain why we've edited this part out. Inappropriate language from Lethal Weapon.
We were talking about Lethal Weapon.
Lethal Weapon, Danny Glover, in the South African consulate during apartheid. That's probably the best way to put it.
There we go. That's good.
Yeah. Anyway, shall we crack on with the theme for today's podcast?
Yeah. How have you been before?
Before we get into that, I am busy. Same as you.
You've been very busy.
I've been very, lots of conferences, speaking with special guests on here, and same as you, really, assessment week. We were talking just before I came on air. Actually, you're probably not going to be able to see that, whether you like it or not. Managed to dislocate my finger this morning playing touch rugby. Of all things, meant to be the most obviously safest, least amount of contact type of rugby there is, and dislocated my finger quite nasty.
It is black.
Yeah, if you can see it against my top. There you go.
Purple.
Two of the guys managed to put it back in for me.
That's all right, because Alex's hands are so big, it actually takes two men to grab one finger.
There was one to hold me. Hold me. He was literally holding me. The other one pulled. Took him 2 attempts to put it back in.
Bite on this wood.
Yeah. 2 of the Australians put it back in for me. Of all the people you trust.
Nice guys.
Oh man, the best,
Great guys.
The best guys. So, obviously, today's podcast is all about
goal setting. So, the reason... I'll give a little background as to why we decided to do this. We often create New Year's resolutions, and we started this podcast as a kind of New Year's resolution, something to start off the new year. And we were kind of I was thinking very much about, when is it that you actually reflect on those New Year's resolutions, new beginnings, things like that? And it seems, 3 months later, we're 2 months in now, going into the third month. Yeah. So into the year kind of is now a good point to reflect on how things are going for the goals that you set at the start of the year, because it's quite often, I don't know if you ever do this, I will always forget about my New Year's resolution and then look at it when I'm setting a new resolution. And I find in teaching sometimes you might set a target, or you might set students targets, but you only really check in when you're measuring against that. So if it's a target grade, for example, and you are looking at assessments, so thinking about the reporting cycle that we're in now, and maybe sometimes the only time that you would look back at the target grade is after an assessment.
Yes.
But throughout the year, obviously the target grades are set for the end of year 7, end of year 8. So throughout the year, you have assessment week 1, assessment week 2, assessment week 3, assessment week 4, whatever those assessment weeks are.
Yeah.
They're kind of inherently built in to check back for that year.
Yeah. And I think the premise for this as well, and where it stems from, is that from an international classroom, there is a lot more onus put on in terms of appraisals, in terms of performance management, and in terms of then student outcomes and attainment. We get inspected once a year, KHJ. So it's a full, what is an Ofsted inspection once a year. So actually those measurements of attainment, the measurements of appraisals and teacher performance is really high. And actually what we're finding is, and I find this even as a faculty leader of a faculty, and you may find it as well, that I do my appraisal at the start of the year, and I'll only really think about it when I then get to the mid of the year, which is actually now, and I generally don't touch it again to the end of the year. And actually that's really a waste of time that could be used for professional development and growth.
And that's exactly what I have been thinking about while I've had my little hiatus, is how can we use this time that we're not necessarily thinking constantly about, oh, I set this target at the beginning, I set this. But how can we build things into our lives that are kind of more, and we'll talk about this later, more habituary?
Yeah.
Is that the word?
Habitual.
Habitual.
You sound like you just took the word obituary and habitual and blended it together. The
Habitual.
Yeah, I'm just going to announce the death of my habits.
So one habit was kebabs.
But actually that part of this, and we laugh and joke about it, just thinking ahead, is about reflecting on old habits.
Yeah.
Things that you want to replace, update,
Agreed.
renew, improve upon, and being able to go in and recognize, you know what, that doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the context of teaching, it may be about, your pedagogical practice, in that you've done something, or the school's vision or your department's vision is about teaching in a certain way, using a certain resource.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be able to reflect on that and go, right, this may be built in, it might be a habit, it could be that, but the goal that's been set either isn't effective or it's dissatisfying. And that's kind of that first question we talked about, is that the setting of goals and the achievement or do we think it's linked to teacher satisfaction?
Now, building on your last guest speaker and gamification of teaching.
Episode 5, by the way. This
episode 5.
Yeah.
I think Philip
Ride, yeah.
Philip was talking about gamification and how we can gamify lessons and we can gamify learning. But it's almost goal setting to me is kind of like gamifying your life. So I'm thinking about a game that I play. Like, I'm an avid gamer. You can tell comics, and I'm a bit of a geek for those of you watching and can see my the wall of my man cave in the background. I like to play games, but these are more grindy games that take ages. I like to set myself little goals. So it might be to get to level 70, get to level 80, get to level 90, and build those little goals within my life, because I get the satisfaction when I meet those goals.
Yeah.
And those little short-term goals build to a bigger long-term goal of like beat a certain boss.
Yeah.
So maybe my, I don't know, magic skills get higher, or I don't know.
You got a bigger wand.
Yeah. And that's it. You get better equipment. So I need this equipment to beat this boss, or I need this skill to beat this boss. So your short-term goal is to get the equipment, then it's beat the boss.
Yeah.
So in my professional life, I've never really thought of it like that. But having these short-term goals, which equate to a longer-term goal, is kind of what I've thought about trying to implement. Now, how I do that, that's where the tricky bit has been coming in.
Yeah, because I'd be interested then in terms of how do you transfer that over to a classroom, in your professional practice?
Exactly.
You don't know. No, we
I don't know.
But we're going to talk about that. And that's interesting. Again, one of the things we talked about with Philip and even with Joyce, when we talked about facilitation and learning, that it's okay not to know.
And I thought that was a really good point that I've always kind of, when you said, when you first start out, it's difficult to say, I don't know the answer to that. I find myself saying that, especially if I'm teaching A-level students, it's not always about knowing every answer. I don't know every crop and its yield amount for farming practices and agriculture. I don't know that. The fact is, can you use a piece of evidence to support whatever you're saying? Yeah.
I think the skills for teachers is then about being able to unpack it and make sense of it for the students, because they're going to come at you with evidence. They're going to come to data and they're going to go, I found this. Like ChatGPT said this, or Google has said this. And then it's a case of whether you can help them unpack it to make sense of it. That for me is the skill where it comes into. But it's interesting what you said about mini goals.
Yeah.
And then we're talking about then how you transfer that. Now, I'm someone who's really interested in goal setting and systems and habits. And it's then, I find a lot of the time now, and there's maybe teachers out there who are listening or watching this, one of the goals we always get set is data-based. It is like, right, your GCSE or your A-level groups need to achieve 75% this, A star to C, and their progress needs to be 75% this, A star to C, because for us as a yearly measurement, our external examination grades.
Outstanding is the majority of students make
Yeah.
more than expected progress?
At the moment, let's say A level, it's 75% A star to C, and then.
So that's the attainment side.
Yeah, from the attainment, and even in attainment, and then once that opens the door, then that gets you to good, and then you open the door to the next parts. Like, well, if you're 75% A star to C, if you're then 61% A star to B, would get you very good. And then you need to be 75% A star to B then to be outstanding. Mm-hmm. So that's a real challenge, because you just get given this one goal of, you got to take your students from here over a 2-year course to then be here. And the parts that then come into that builds into part of the appraisal. What are the steps? What are your methods, your pedagogical approaches? So
anything the midterm assessments would be your check-in points in that classroom environment.
In that, the reflective part there to really get you thinking about and for us to discuss is, are there benefits of goal settings for professional development? So if I've done my appraisal and part of it is that, what I would advocate for then is having, my PD needs to be linked to my appraisal. Mm-hmm. And I've had these discussions with a few people on LinkedIn, people who lead schools and lead to PD, and having these conversations about it. And what we find is, or my own personal, and people out there might have this as well, is that PD and appraisals are two separate things. In that my either performance management or appraisal, whichever one you want to call it, I'm not a fan of necessary performance management. I dislike that term. I've said it before, I'll say it again. But they don't tie in. And actually, it should be a whole part about professional growth, about the industry we're in, about growing and developing as a practitioner. Well, my appraisal should be tied to that. In terms of what I'm doing, it should be, and then the professional development, the courses I do, or the PD inquiry that I do on my own time is guided, facilitated, led by things that will tie into that. And I think that for me addresses my own satisfaction, because I often say for some of it, being very honest, is that I'm not unhappy, I'm just not satisfied. I don't feel content. But it's not unhappiness, not to be misconstrued with it. But because of those reasons, I don't feel like I'm challenged or I'm being developed. And that's throughout the course of, and that's why I do these things. That's why I do a lot of the things off my own back, is for that, to try and generate my own happiness, contentment. So I think if addressing this first part, if you're out there and you're listening or you're watching and you are someone who is in charge of professional development in your school, tie in appraisals to your professional development and make it personalized to your teachers so that they can have satisfaction as well as growth. We can finish the podcast there now, can't we?
I mean, done. Job done. Cut.
Pretty much. No.
I do agree with you there, and it's quite often the case. I think we see it all the time that PD isn't relevant. A lot of PD that you might go to that is run, and I'm not saying this about my school or any school I've worked at before, but I have seen it, and the conversations I have with colleagues are often, it's the case that they would sit for an hour in a PD session on a Monday afternoon or Tuesday afternoon after school in those twilight sessions. And especially for those of you back in the UK that have to do, or I know there was a big thing when I was in the UK, it was like 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. on these twilight sessions where it would be people would come in and talk to you. And more often than not, these aren't appropriate for what you need. No. It's not individualized. I think we've spoken about it before, PD being more, if it's like a lesson, and you and Joyce were talking about this, there's got to be individual, almost differentiation for adults learning as much as there is differentiation for children learning, because we're all learners at the end of the day. And without saying, without roping everyone into the same batch of, you don't want to treat adults like kids, to some extent, a learner is a learner.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, if it's based on, as you said, based on the appraisal, because that's built by, and that ties in again to what Joyce was saying, built by the adults, what are your goals for this year? Yeah. We do have data-driven goals that are set very much by the school And it would be, 75% in your GCSE classes, 75% in your A-level classes. But then there's always another element to goal setting for your performance management appraisal, whatever terminology you would use. And that goal setting's usually something more personal. So it might be for me, I'm quite happy to share one of my goals for this year is to fully embed the BTEC course because we are a growing school. We're still developing. We don't have year 11 students yet. So how the tricky bit here is how do we measure embedding something? How do you make create something quantifiable, measurable, which kind of nicely segues to
strategies.
Yeah.
Strategies for doing it. And I think most people, teachers-wise, wherever you are in the world, would be aware of SMART. So in terms of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. And we do a lot of our action plans based off that. And it's one of those things that I find is a skill. It does not come naturally to me. Like I can identify things, but the other parts and developing an action plan and using these methods to do it, like I end up being very vague. And it's only through probably the last 2 years where reading more books, like non-teacher based books, a lot more books on leadership, about developing teams, about culture and coaching. Having gone through those, actually the specifics and the detail, as the saying goes, the devil is in the detail, and the hows and the whys become really important. So it's like some of those best books, and most people know it. Simon Sinek's Start with Why, then go about how, and then lastly do the what. And if you can start with those parts, you're going to make it specific. It's clear, it's well defined. You know why I'm going to do this. Why do I need to get 75%? Why do we need that? Well, that's just a state of the nation that we live in.
That's part of the parcel of working here, yeah.
Other countries are going to be very different, very specific. But for us, that's one of the things. Okay, the how. How am I going to get to that point? And that's when you can start to filter in all these different things about, right, my pedagogical approaches, support, my strategies, my team meetings, all these things. And then you can make that measurable. Okay, well, I need quantity and I need quality. So, if we're going to quantify something that's the assessment weeks we've just done, progress tracks, the more in terms of talking about now in terms of retrieval-based learning, but it's like, well, I need somehow to be able to measure these at some point across the course of the journey, as it were, to say that, well, what I'm doing is working. And if it's not, then that's where your reflective metacognition comes in to go, it's not worked, or it's not worked for this or for this student. What am I going to bring into it?
Yeah, how can we address that?
Yeah, so that it brings in the relevance, because everything we do is relevant. And then it's time-based. We know the time we're going to work on. So SMART is one of those ones that's I think obvious for a lot of people and the most used one. And I'm sure there are others out there. And actually, if you do know any, this is our engagement, put it into the comments. Put it into the comments that's on there on YouTube or any of the social media sites that you see this in terms of LinkedIn, or Twitter, any of those things. Like, what different models have you got for actually setting goals? But for me, then, it's the obstacles. That's the next part. And that's, and I'm going to go straight into the most obvious one. It's time.
Time.
Yeah.
Which is an element of the SMART model, is it has to be time-based. So you've got to say, I will do this by this point.
Yeah.
But then where do you find the time to actually make those? Is it in the school day? I know we get given free lessons, free periods. These are preparation, planning, assessment periods that we are to use that time effectively we manage our own time in that sense, and that's wonderful. We get time to plan lessons. Okay. We get time to write assessments. We get time to prepare for lessons, mark books. That time is given there. Yeah. Is there enough of that time usually given? Probably not. I'd say 90% of the teachers that I know work at home to some extent.
Yeah, because also I would say I might use some of that time in school as decompression time. If I've taught 3 hours in a row.
On the bounce.
Yeah. Yes. And with timetables changing now, ours is 1, 2 break, then we do 3, 4, 5 lunch. Now, if you're someone who's taught 3, 4, and 5, get to lunch, you could be on duty. Now, you're going to need somewhere in there an element of decompression time, because I can't just go, teach 3 lessons, have been on it, I've been leading, I've been facilitating, I've been this, I've been putting on a show, and then go right now. It's like, no, I need to just mentally get myself, and then I might do. And it's that balance of that is a challenge one. So time,
I agree.
In terms of schools and leaders, I've really got to look at it and go, what do we give our time over for our staff? And that for me comes on trust and responsibility. If your staff are responsible, they're trustworthy.
I agree.
And it's then a case of, if I trust you, then I'm going to give you that time to be your time, to be, you're leading your time.
So you could essentially disseminate PD time and say, you know what, you have this hour every single week. Everyone has it. It's directed time.
Yeah.
We are saying this is where your PD needs to take place. Now, if you choose as a professional to use that time for marking, report writing, any of that kind of stuff,
I'm going to disagree with you.
Then you've chosen that.
Yeah.
But you've been given that time to undertake professional development.
I would say my take on it is that if you've been given that time for PD,
you should use it for PD. Yeah, I agree.
No matter what. And I think in there, it's then a case of staying on track and actually having something that goes, right, guys, here's an hour. And at the end of it, we're going to put that on. And now I know you could go, look, the PD's this day. And if you've got a time and you want to do it in the beginning of the day, because it's non-contact time, I don't mind where you do it. But by the end of this day, there's a Google form or a Microsoft, whatever it is, that's been filled in. So you've been reflective on an element of a practice, or you've put in your feedback, because it keeps you on task. Yeah. And you can't shirk it then. Like for me, you're going, right, here's the task, it's yours, whatever you've done. I want you to write me a reflective piece on this Google form, on this Teams form, whatever it may be, to just go through what I've reflected on this now. Now you've got a 24-hour window to do it, but at least then I know you've done it. So my responsibility as the leader for this, you've done it. I know.
I wasn't saying I wouldn't choose to do that. What I was saying was, if you have chosen not to do that, then that's the decision that person's made. You see what I mean?
But then also for me, it depends on the person. That's responsibility. Yeah. And I would question that and go, right, are you the type of person then
that we need in this team,
that we want on this bus?
Exactly.
As you say, right people on the bus,
on the bus.
Because that's an element of motivation and buying into the culture of the school.
So you've got the high trust, but then high accountability.
Yeah. And that for me is responsibility.
Yeah.
Like if you're in this institute, then we want you to be the best version of you. Mm-hmm. And part of that comes with growth and development and a willingness and a want to always be better. I've almost been teaching 20 years. Do I have it mastered? No way. Do the goalposts? No. Do the goalposts keep changing and moving? Yes, they do. Do the skills that I need to have keep changing? Yes, they do. Yep. 20 years ago, it was me and a PowerPoint. There wasn't Nearpod. There wasn't Formative. There wasn't Edpuzzle.
Before that, I remember acetate and overhead projectors.
Yeah. I remember learning that way.
Yeah, that's it.
Excel.
I wasn't teaching that way.
Oh, no, I wasn't either. Old, but not that old. Thank you for tuning into the International Classroom podcast. If you're enjoying today's episode and want to stay up to date for future episodes, be sure to follow and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you want to watch our episodes and get more tips for success as an international teacher, you can also find us on YouTube. Head over to Deep Teaching and hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts on today's episode. If you have any questions or you want to share your own tips and experiences, feel free to reach out to us via any of our social media platforms and we'll be happy to hear from you. Thanks again for listening. But those things weren't there. And so then you've got to think, well, actually, from a digital strategy point of view, which is now the big thing, ed tech, whether you use it or not, is what are you doing to upskill? And so therefore, the professional development and growth is like, wherever you are, you should be in that mindset of, growth is a necessity, development is a necessity. And, whether you enjoy it or not, it's one of those. It's like, if you went to the doctors and he had, and you went, when was the last PD course you went on? 5 years ago.
Well, I think we've
said this, and I stand by it.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I won't let you touch me.
Yeah.
And that for me is the mindset of this in terms of growth and development. Mm-hmm. It's about being able to reflect on, and go, right, actually, there's an element of accountability. I do my reflections on this practice. I'm setting the time aside for myself. So I'm managing my time. And then actually it helps me stay on track. It helps me to reflect and go from a weekly perspective, these are the obstacles I faced using this. And if I'm then leading that, I can look at it and read it through, or your team leader could look at it and read it through and go, I can see that you're struggling with this. I can help you, or this person here is how there'd be a good person to go and watch.
I think that's really interesting, is having that that feedback and that reflective piece. Like you say, having a Google Doc that can then be shared with the head of PD, and having that reflection to really, keeps people motivated, hopefully, keeps people on track, keeps it in that sense. I actually really like that as an idea. One thing that I thought about whilst I was thinking about how this could be implemented and having that is maybe not only the head of PD, because that's, an awful lot for them to read over, and they're obviously teachers as well, and it is part and parcel of the job. But what about linking with a buddy? Maybe someone who is not in your department, someone that you don't necessarily speak to all the time, not necessarily a friend. Yeah,
and I think, again, this is for me going back to the use of technology. Right, instead of the appraisal, instead of that document that we do, put it on Google Form. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what you're going to tell me is teacher, department, and 3 things you want to achieve or develop this year. And at some point now, there's going to be a crossover of language between someone there and someone there. And you can just go, these 2 or 3 people want to develop the same thing, or it's a very similar thing. You know what? Half term, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, in independent inquiry for staff. You guys work together. Go and observe each other. See what you can figure out and find out about this to develop your practice in that. I'll give you the time. You need, 20 minutes cover. We can figure this out. And that's the challenge. When we talk about time, the obstacle, I need cover to go and...
Yeah, to go and observe somebody else's lesson.
Yeah. And it's the flexibility then within your department. Now, I'm looking at science. We've got 7 teachers. There's always someone. I could find someone. But as an SLT member, if that was yours, I'd be like, look, I can find you 20 minutes. If you give me enough time, I can say, this is where I've got 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. I'll sit in the lesson.
I'll pop in, sit in the lesson for you. And you go and have a look.
And that for me, that in my personal stance is the responsibility of the SLT who maybe have a really reduced timetable or don't teach at all. Is to be able to go, right, I need to be able to give over the time that my staff need to develop. Because if I'm not willing to give that time, how can I expect them to be able to
give that time?
Yeah, because we see it all the time in the staff, 3:30, gone out the door. I'm okay with that. I like to work from home. My kids are golden. They will sit in school, or they'll be like, "Can we go home?" I say, "Yeah." Either way,
nip into staff rooms and steal sweets, if I remember correctly.
They still do that. Generally, I find the teachers bring them sweets now just to keep them.
To appease them. Please don't cause chaos.
Yeah, and that ties trust and responsibility.
Yeah,
of course you can, because you're getting everything done.
Yeah,
you're getting it done. Of course, I trust you. It's the other side of it, and those staff that disappear off and go, "Well, hang on a minute,"
and then miss deadlines.
Yeah, and from an international perspective, something to be aware of. Why there is in your contract actually the allotted hours. Mm-hmm. So you have to be in school from 7:20 to 4:00.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And to give you that time to make sure that stuff gets done. 9 times out of 10, people are sat around twiddling their thumbs, aren't they? Because they just want to get home.
Yeah.
But it's bridge building. It is being showing that you are responsible and trustworthy, and go, you know what? I need to decompress. I don't want to do it straight away after school. But at 4:35, once I've gone home and had a cup of tea, of course I will. Yeah,
I agree. And I often leave when I finish the day.
Yeah.
I will leave when, if we've got PD until 4, I will leave straight after that, because you've had that extra hour, you've done extra there. And you do want to have that decompression. Yeah. We start very early in the UAE. We have to be in school by 7:10, 7:15.
Yeah.
Most places. So it's a long day.
It is. One of our sister schools in Talim, I was told this actually, what they've done is they've flipped on its head. So the early morning start is for staff, and they will do ECAs or bits in that time, 7:30 to 8:30, because they were finding that kids were just struggling. And I can't blame them. Kids were struggling to get into school. So the day starts slightly later. Imagine if you could go,
nice.
right, actually, you know what, 7:30 till 8:30 is professional development time or ECA time, but my time. And then school starts at 8:30 and then finishes at 3:30, 3:45. It's like,
you go home at 3:45 and you are done.
What was that book? Remember was it you there about Swallow the Frog?
Yeah, swallow the frog, eat the frog, eat the frog.
That was it.
So the first thing you do, for those of you who, I don't know, have we ever spoken about
No, let's assume.
Assuming you've never heard of this before, if you wake up in the morning, the worst thing you could do is eat a frog. And then everything else from the rest of the day going forward is positive, is better than what you've done the first thing. Now, that analogy maybe doesn't fit here because I absolutely love my ECA.
Yeah.
I've got to say, the only reason I do my ECA is because I really enjoy it. So that being at the end of the day for me is like a little treat. That's like a little reward at the end of the day. And then
But PD at the end of the day.
But PD can be the frog.
Yeah.
Or
it's not PD itself.
Yeah.
It's the time it takes
the
place
time
in.
it takes. And I think that goes back to the satisfaction of it.
Yeah.
Linking back to what we were saying about satisfaction, you want to be doing something that you can see the benefit in and you can feel like you are getting better as a teacher.
Yeah.
But also, that's a really interesting point when you say, if you do it in the morning, maybe you read about something, maybe you have read about something or you've watched a video of a teacher. And I like PD of watching. This is going to sound really sad, but I like watching videos of people teaching.
There's not,
Teacher TV, do you remember that?
Yeah.
When you did your PGCE.
There's not enough of it.
And I love it because I think, there's little subtle body language movements and you can pick up on it really, really. When you're watching, this is why I love observing other lessons now.
Agreed.
And you can see, especially if there's a student that you maybe don't get on so well with, and it happens, personalities clash. You're never going to be every single student's favorite teacher every single year.
Or it's the subject.
Or it's something, it happens. And you go and see a student in a different classroom where they're excelling. And there are very subtle body language movements that people do. And that's my favorite thing. If you were doing that in the morning, watching something, watching a video, watching usually on YouTube, or I've got the old DVDs of Teacher TV. And you pick up on something, you think, you know what, I'm going to try that today. It's fresh, it's there. You've done it there. By the time you've finished your PD at the end of the day, you go home, you go to sleep.
You forget about
life. You might have forgotten about it. You might not, but you might have.
Yeah.
It's more likely to, okay, I want to try that. I'm going to try that today, period 3, with this class.
Yeah. It's an interesting one. Like, that's one thing we tried to bring back in actually for us. And I've done a few videos. I recorded myself and then I recorded 1 or 2 other teachers just because dead easy for me. Got the camera, got a lav, go for it. And we had to do it in our PGC. We had to record ourselves teaching. And that, when you then watch it back and reflect. In other countries, they do it. I think Japan, Singapore, and triads, they will go and watch, observe, they will record and do that as a piece of professional learning, like feedback. And you have to. Like, if I told you when I was playing rugby and even as a rugby coach, when we used to record games, the amount of stats and then the breakdown of the specifics in terms of what you could show people, and you're watching the England game yesterday, you can see it in the background, coaches with laptops, instant feed. And they can go rewind, fast forward, to break down and look at it. It's like if high performance athletes and teams are using that method of feedback to show and go, right, you did this. This is where there needs to be a shift.
Yeah.
Like, we need to do it. We need to be recording lessons.
It's the same, if you're watching the football.
Yeah.
And you see the pundits and they've got the big smart board on there and they'll be dragging out boxes around where people, there's a big area of space here, blah, blah, blah. Well, we could be doing that, saying there's an area over there where those students aren't focusing. Or there's an area that is blind to the teacher because of where they're stood. And it's little things like that. I'm not going to teach people how to suck eggs. You know how to run your classroom. If you're, if you're a qualified, exactly. If you're a qualified teacher, you would hope that
but you could
know these things, but there's always things that you could be switching up, changing.
I think you could then take that and build your short-term goals around it.
Exactly.
So, the start of the year or something like that, come and video a lesson, and then you can sit down and go, well, I've always had long-term goals, obviously going back to it, but then I can utilize this for short-term, like something to do for the next 6 weeks, and go, right, I can work with my coach, instructional coach, my buddies, my triads, whatever it is and whatever you do, but have that very clear set of goals that from the video observation, my personal reflection was this, and this, and I want to develop on my ability to, verbally ask questions or, in terms of student collaboration, whatever it may be. And then you can work with someone to achieve that, because that's the thing, as we said at the start, short-term goals for us as teachers are almost like non-existent.
Yeah.
That's in my opinion, because we just go, right, end of the year, you need to have this.
Yeah.
You want to get to this, and you have another, you do your original meeting at the start, your meeting right at the end, and a meeting in the middle. It's like, why, where are the short terms? Where's the tracking? Where's the conversation, the coaching, and the reflection then and there? It's like we as teachers go, right, what has the biggest impact on student learning? What's one of the biggest things that impacts learning in a classroom? Feedback. And what is it that has the biggest feedback? Immediate. The timing of it has to be immediate, so it can be immediate or it can be at the end of an activity or something, but the timing of it is key. So you've given me an objective to achieve at the start of a year, and we're not going to see each other now for another 4 months.
It doesn't work. Yeah.
And I'm off track. I'm not staying on track with it. Because I don't even think about it.
Because I've forgotten about it.
Yeah, I've not even looked at it. Not even looked at it. It's not something that I have, for me, again, how would I overcome this? Have a personal journal. So doing the MPQs we spoke about. You mentioned you got yours as well.
Got mine on, yeah.
You got a personal journal there to fill in as you
I have
do.
my learning journal, yeah.
So as you go through this, obviously you're reading through different texts, you're reading through different research, as well as going through different case studies. And they're asking you to personally reflect and write down your personal reflections on X, Y, or Z. And teachers-wise, actually, why wouldn't you have a personal journal to reflect on? We talk about metacognition all the time in classrooms. You want students to be more metacognitive. You want them to develop these skill sets. We spoke about the tiers of it.
Yeah.
Third tier is strategic. Fourth tier, highest tier is reflection. So actually, if you want teachers to be able to develop reflective thinking and reflection in students, to be strategic as well as other things, actually, you know what? We need to be doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
How can we model it?
Here's a question. When you did your PGCE, I imagine that you were asked to write reflections on lessons.
Yeah.
After they've gone. And it was, these kids were engaged, these kids weren't. The starter went well. The instruction might have been not as confident as I would have hoped, and then the activity crumbled.
Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I remember writing a couple of things like that. You're learning, you're still trying things, you're trying new things, it happens. And do you now reflect on lessons and think, next year I'll change that to this straight away?
No.
When does the reflection happen? Because I've got my answer here.
Yeah.
That I'm thinking that I would, the way.
Like, I would like to. And that's one of the differences, I think, between the curriculum or syllabus you teach. So, for example, having experienced A-levels and our IB, when you construct, your lessons in the IB, especially the MYP, one of the components of the unit is the end of it is a reflection box to go through it and go, right, what worked, what didn't, and what do we need to amend and tweak, and we do it. Whereas in GCSE and A-levels, depending on how your team is set up, it's very insular. Like I teach the only, let's say, year 11 biology class. The other ones are combined. So, slightly different. There are some nuances, but slightly different. And we're at different times in it. So for me, I reflect on it quite quickly in my head. I think that's where experience comes in.
Yeah.
What works, what doesn't work. But a deep dive into the types of activities or the content or the pace or my facilitation of learning versus my instruction of learning, those parts aren't there on a framework for me to kind of go and fill in.
Yeah.
I think from a PGCE or a 5-year, I'd say even up to 5 years, having that there as a dialogue, as a sheet and a constant thought process, because it's hard because you get one lesson, second lesson, third lesson. If you're on a 6-period day.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking, yeah.
The best part would be to do it in terms of team teaching, whereas actually as a team, we teach year 7, we teach year 8, 9. It's harder to get to GCSE, but if you're in those parts together, get to the end of a unit. Get to the end of the unit and then reflect and go, what worked, what didn't work? What do I want to keep? What do I want to change? And have that discussion in your team and go, right, make a note of it now, and in game time in the summer, we'll tackle it then. But let's be very clear on it right now. What worked, what needs amending, what to change to what. So an overview, and then come summertime, then we'll do it. That would be my take on it.
I like that as an idea. I really do. The when you talk about the gain time, that's a little trickier if you don't get gain time. Yeah. To then feedback. So we're revamping our Key Stage 3. The reason I'm asking this is because one of my short-term goals is to redo essentially our schemes of work for year 7, 8, and 9.
So when you say redo, is that
revamp,
okay? So it's not like
change the topics,
starting from scratch.
Some of it, yeah, because we trialed something this year. We tried for those geographers out there, Tim Marshall's book, Prisoners of Geography.
Maybe not many of you.
Not many. It's just me.
No, there's loads of you. Like a plague.
So our year 9s did an entire topic on Prisoners of Geography.
Okay.
And it's been really interesting. It's been very, very high level. It's been very, what I would say is probably more towards A-level students, is probably more suitable. The book itself is, can be used for Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4, Key Stage 5. The way we pitched the lessons were very high.
Yeah.
I want to change that, but also the layout of the way we did it straight after a topic on development. And the two were kind of very closely linked. We taught the top unit on development, unit on prisoners, and then the two were just too closely linked. We kind of found ourselves stretching a topic over a period of time that we could have integrated the two. So when I say I want to redo, essentially, I do want to redo it, but find something else to fill that gap. If we merge the two development and the Prisoners of Geography topic that we did, and then I want to find something else,
So you mentioned that was one of your short-term goals.
Yeah.
All right. So for the people listening and watching, how have you set that up? Like in terms of measurable, in terms of what you want to achieve, and how have you broken that down into smaller parts? Have you given yourself a time frame to have you set it up?
Yeah. So I want this finished. I want the lessons planned for term 1 of next academic year.
Okay.
So we've finished the topics now. They've done, my reflection has come kind of at the end of the half term, but it's probably overdue. Because of everything else that was going on, I didn't have time to do that reflection, as we said, during the process. So we're at the half term. Then I decided, you know what? We kind of covered it. We're not going to continue with this unit. We'll park it. We'll embed it into the first unit of development for next year, and we'll carry on with what we were planning for the rest of the year.
And do you think that's been beneficial?
I think it will be beneficial for next year.
Even in the planning part, like the goal, like your short-term part, do you think how you've approached it has been beneficial, or would you do it in a different way?
I think the only way, because this is quite a unique situation, I don't think there's many times that I'm going to be planning something to reintegrate from something that I've done is going to, it's hard to explain. I'm trying to set it up so that I don't have to do anything at the start of next year.
Yeah.
I'm kind of planning for then. If I'd have left it any longer, I would have completely forgotten how the lessons would have fitted into the previous one. Because
I would say my first thoughts here, having conversations this week, thinking about next year, is most of us, and I'm going to say this, is like, I don't have time. At this moment in time, I am firefighting my way through a list of things, and actually being able to incorporate and develop things for next year is really tricky.
Is difficult, yeah.
So that's why I was interested when you talk about the short-term goals. It's like, well, I've got this that I want to achieve, and actually it's a 6-week project.
Yeah.
And so therefore I know what my outcome is, and I'm going to work backwards to then go, right, I need to do this, this, and this is my time frame. and that's how I'm going to do it. And I think that's probably the common approach most people have to it. So kind of ties into something we talk about different ways. Like one of the books I would say that's over the past 2 years or so, I've seen a lot of on the internet, people talk a lot about, is Atomic Habits. Now, I think it's been out for a longer time than that. Have you come across it before?
I've listened to you talk. You've talked to me about it a lot. I haven't read it. I'll be straight up with you here, Alex. I haven't read the book.
Okay.
I haven't done the homework, Mr. Gray.
Sorry.
But after everything that you have spoken about and the pointers that you've given me previously, it is something I will read.
I listen.
Time.
Time is that.
Listen.
I see.
I could listen to a podcast on it.
Oh yeah.
While
there
I'm
are
in
a
the
few.
car.
I think James Clear, actually, so the author of the book does have, I think, his own podcast. But I listen to it on Audible.
Okay.
One of the ways I've gotten around finding time to read is actually going on to Audible. So I utilize that and I'll listen to the book at like 1.5 times speed because I don't need all the breaks in between, how bad that makes me sound. Or the other one I've started using over the last year is something called short form. So short form will allow you to take, in essence, the short form of the book. So it will give you the synopsis of it, but you can still get the chapters summarized, paragraphed, and the premise of it is there. It's like a synopsis of a book. And then you can go away and decide if I want to go even further into it, I want to find out more about this. It's how I approach it. So I've kind of gone about those. I've listened to the whole book. I think I've even got it to read. I'm not sure. But I've also got it on short form. So I can dive back into it when I think, oh, gee, I've forgotten. Right, quick review. It's right there for me. Oh, yeah. But the reason why I addressed it is that because it talks a lot about systems. And how we generate systems over probably this idea of habits. So one of the things we talk about or have just spoken about, isn't it? Is like what keeps you on track, what keeps you motivated. Most staff, when it comes to growth and development, professional development, I just there isn't always
you motivated.
There isn't that motivation necessarily there, and it's the idea of willpower and discipline to achieve goals and how you set systems up to do it. So obviously, I'm not going to go into deep dive into the entire book with it, but obviously the premise it talks about is to do with systems and how you can go through and go things about making obvious. So I want to make what I'm going to change into my system really obvious. I want to make it attractive. It's got to be easy. It's got to be satisfying.
Yeah.
So those are the types of things I would really recommend for you, everyone out listening and watching, if you're interested in developing your habits, or in this case, changing them and putting in systems into place, then, go and listen to this. Because what I've done this year is, and I'm probably guilty of this as a lot of people, is I used to sleep with my phone next to the bed.
I still do. Yeah.
So since January the 1st, not had it.
No way. Is that your... Wow, that's
charging.
really good.
So I charge it downstairs, don't need it. Use my watch as my alarm because that's all I need. Because what I found was the unattractive part of what I was doing is, and I noticed this in Kerry, she will sit in bed on her phone like so many of the other population. So she'll wake up, first thing she does is phone. So she's in bed for an extra 15, 20 minutes. Before she goes to bed, she'll literally have the cover over her with the phone to get the light for another 15, 20 minutes. And I was guilty of that. Like first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, phone, and it keeps me in bed for another 10, 15, 20 minutes.
Really?
So I noticed that and go, that's part of my system. That's a habit. Little fly there. It's become habitual in terms of, that's what I'm doing. I don't even think about it now. That's how habitual it is. So I looked at it in terms of, what's the attractive part? What do I want to achieve? Well, I actually want to be up and out of bed. There's things I want to do. And so put my phone downstairs. And I don't go and check it first off. I'll go down, sort the kids out, going through, and then I'll check it and go, right, any emails, social media posts, those in there. And it deals with that. And for me, is now become habitual. Like the thought of even taking it up to bed with me, unless it was an emergency, I wouldn't do it. And it's become consistent. And that's the key thing for it. And across any walk of life, the consistency of doing things, the discipline to continue to do things, but it's dead easy.
It could even be, you think of it going to the gym or dieting or anything. I think to kind of jump on the back of that, I've turned all notifications off my social media, but also off my work emails, because I had work emails on my phone. Now they're there. I can access them as I'd like to.
Yeah.
But I was finding, and this was my habit, was as soon as a notification came through, I would check my phone.
Dopamine hits.
If it was an email, if it was a WhatsApp, if it was anything, even work emails, from a company trying to sell you metacognition products or whatever it might be, then you get the dopamine hit. And I have weaned myself off it so that I only now check my work emails.
That was it.
When I want to.
So the things he was talking about was cue, craving, response, reward.
Yes.
So often that's
and the
it.
Reward.
Yeah. So the cue is that, your response, look at it straight away, and then in terms of the craving and the reward part, it's like the dopamine, I want to.
And if you know that red dot is there,
you hear
that's the
noise,
craving. You are
the vibration on the watch, all those different things come into it. So, back into it in terms of just saying about, how you can change those systems and habits. Go and look at that book. He's one. There's a few other guys, again, top of my head, I really should prepare better. There's one or two others that you can use in terms of...
I think that every week about me.
Proper preparation and planning prevents poor performance. That's all you need.
Many poor performances.
I can't say what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
But so with yours, like we're talking about short-term, long-term, in terms of the benefit of it, like... the benefit of doing those things and having systems in place, like in terms of what you're working through in the geography, like you're lucky, especially I'm going to say lucky that you've got the time.
I do have the time. And I think I am lucky in the sense that my team around me are extremely supportive.
Yeah.
We work really well together. And I think having a good team around you allows you to be able to set those short-term goals and focus on those, and having the right people in place, having the right people on the bus to be able to be on board with, okay, this didn't work. I explained that to the team and said, this was my idea. And you know what? It didn't work as well as it could have. Do we have any ideas? Yes, we could do this. Okay, I'll tell you what we're going to do is we're going to work together. You get the first 4 lessons done. You get the next 4 lessons done. You get the next 4 lessons done. I'll get the next 4 lessons done.
So
short term.
Yeah.
Ding, ding, ding. We've got until the end of this half term to get the scheme of work written and the lessons in place. This is going to save us an absolute age next year.
That's the reward.
There's the reward.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and then you build. That's hard to build that into a system or a habit, though, isn't it? Because it's short term.
And it has taken this year to build. And I've got to say, there's been times where the team have pushed back and said, this isn't not for this particular point, because we've kind of understood that. I think now, initially, last year, when I was trying to push this out with my team, push these ideas, they were kind of like, this is for next year. We've got reports to write. We've got this, we've got that. And I'm like, I understand that. I do. If we get this done now.
Yeah.
When it comes to the reporting system next year, we won't have to.
And I don't know if that's going to be, from an international perspective, one of the challenges that we face from working in Dubai, working in an international classroom. And this is where, a healthy comparison and again, people engaging and commenting with this, like the amount of assessments and reports, because we hear a lot about the workload coming globally across marking and all these different things. They're not necessarily just unique challenges to Dubai, are they?
No, I think it happens in fee-paying schools because parents are paying an awful lot of money. They do want something tangible out of it, not necessarily just the grades, not just the grades at the end or things like that, but you want to provide a piece of paper that says how well your child is doing. And it is that paper trail that we are providing. It's part of the service that we are providing as a fee-paying school, whether that's international, UK-based and domestic or...
Yeah, I think and that ties into then for teachers prioritizing what they do. And that's a challenge in itself.
That is tough.
And I know we spoke about discipline a little bit, but sometimes, how we prioritize and understanding perspective of different teachers, like what is a priority to me isn't necessarily a priority to you. And I need to be okay with that. As a leader, as a team member, it's like, getting perspective of what's going on and go, this is a team priority.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes it's hard to say, but you just got to suck it up. This is a priority, guys. And we need to get this done. And be disciplined in doing it, because the reward of that is going to be this. But sometimes it's the challenge itself is getting people on that bus, keeping them on that, like, this is a priority. Because actually, working on that part, I can't ask you to do the weekend because that's yours. It's the priority for you is decompression and relaxation.
And no one's going to ask anyone just to get this out. I am not asking my staff to work at the weekend. Definitely not.
No.
This is, can we spend 20 minutes of this free going through and just, can we dedicate this time together? We can sit together and go through it. And can we try and bash out how we're going to integrate this part of the book or this part of this topic into this part or whatever it might be. It could, this could be applied to absolutely anything. It could be trip management. It could be, can we dedicate 30 minutes of your free time today of one of these lessons? This is a priority. We want to get a trip going to not necessarily South Africa or something as big as that, but it could just be a trip to the beach. Yeah.
Do you think then, just to kind of draw this to a close, from where we are in Dubai, do you think the concept of professional development and the idea of growth professionally and personally, do you think it's put more, do you think it takes more status? Do you think it has more impact, and is it more important where we are here versus maybe in other countries around the world?
I think yes. I do think because there's so many PD opportunities out here. There's so many conferences, Collab UAE. There's the EdTech that you spoke at. What was that? What was that called? You know what I mean? It was at the World Trade Center.
Oh, Guess.
I was there. You were there. Guess.
I don't know how people. How do you pronounce it?
The Jess conference. Like, there's so many conferences. That's my dog.
Oh, my dog does this all the time. I've had someone who would no comment on it, by the way. That dog of yours barking. Sorry, by the way. It's a different dog with same barking.
My dog this time, birds outside, hates them.
Over the weekend, there was, I think it was 3 different conferences, or 4 I saw over LinkedIn taking place. There was something going on in Bahrain. There was a conference, the teaching conference in Abu Dhabi. I was at a conference in Sharjah for the GEMS cluster school.
Yes, you were,
then I think Grace Wilson was doing something for the sort of a leadership one that took place, I think, again, recently over this week or weekend. So there's lots of... I think
because it is thrown at you, if you're looking and if you're in those circles and you are, if you're heavily on LinkedIn or you follow those things on Instagram or Facebook or anything like that, then because there is so much opportunity to do so, I think it is at the forefront of people's minds more so here. But I imagine... Sorry...
You swallowed the fly, didn't you?
I've eaten the fly. I've eaten the frog and eaten the fly.
He's showing me the fly. Thanks.
Okay,
destroyed.
That's done.
It is there.
Protein.
Oh yeah. Listen, that's a different one. But no, you're right. In terms of that is part of your professional, and that can be part of your goal setting in terms of attending these things, networking, learning more about it.
No,
you carry on.
What I was going to say was, without me ever having worked in a different international setting, so I've never worked in Singapore, I've never worked in another country, I've worked in the UK, and I think compared to when I was working in the UK, definitely, whether that's because I'm at a different stage in my career now, or whether it's just because I'm older and I'm more open to thinking about goal setting and thinking about my PD and how I can get to the next stage, how can I pursue my career.
It's because it's a cultural thing across schools, isn't it? And it's almost competitive.
I think it is competitive.
Yeah. I had someone, and this made me, I think I've told you about this, like a friend of mine, he was really proud of his LinkedIn. Really proud of his LinkedIn followers. It's like, look at my LinkedIn followers. And it was
gamified.
All these, and I was just, and he went, how many did you have? You don't want to know. How many? He's like, go on, how many? It's like
triple, my friend.
It was about, I think it's gone up now, and he's just like, wow. And he'll know as soon as I say to him who he is, he's like, well, I'm going to be a head teacher. He knows who he is. If he's listening to this, he'll know exactly who he is. It just made me laugh in terms of, but it was interesting. I listened to an interview today, actually, with Creed 3 that's coming out. So it's got the 2 main actors who are in it. And it was talking about competitive and creativity. And the guy came out with a really interesting quote in terms of saying that, obviously, I can't know exactly what it was, but it was the idea of that competitiveness, obviously, we can be creativity. Like they're not the same thing. Like there's different types of competition that can come into it. But actually, if you remove that and appreciate actually what one person does to another doesn't necessarily have to breed the creativity and competition. The competition between you, it can help breed the creativity, that you need to move up another level and so on and so forth. And I think that's why the PD that's available here and setting the relevant goals for yourself, not just go, I need to be a better teacher. It's like, actually, no, really, really dig down and be forensic in, you know what? I want to improve my understanding of digital literacy. I need to understand, great, I know 4 or 5 people out there who post all the time. I can recommend you these 5 people and they're great at sharing. They will happily speak with you and share. And they're on LinkedIn, they're on Twitter, they're on this, and that will allow you to then be creative. PD isn't, in my opinion, and goal setting, and development and growth and having these things short or long term isn't necessarily then about just taking what other people do. It's about watching someone and go, how can I use that? How can I incorporate that? And I think, using these goals of going, right, I need it to be specific. It's like, but it's got to be specific to me. The measurable, the achievable. It's like, well, if I do what you do, right, I'm not going to achieve that. Someone could look at, what I do in terms of videos, or even like this and go, well, I can't achieve, well, mine would be, well, why can't you achieve that? Well, what would it take for you to do it? Well, how would you do it differently? How can it be specific to you, realistic as well? And there's all these different things that when it comes to goal setting and now being, as I say, make it specific to you. Don't look at what other people are doing necessarily and go, oh, I could never do that. Look at what they're doing and go, I wonder how I could implement that in my life or in my profession.
How could I do something similar? How could I do it? It doesn't have to be the same.
And that's the observation. The benefit for me, the best thing about observing, which you mentioned earlier, is seeing what someone else does, and being able to go, that's really good. I reckon if I did this, this, and this, I could fit it into my lesson. Yeah. And that's what I do. It's inspiration, it's innovation, because you're just taking what someone else has done and tweaking and changing it to fit you. And that's the hardest part about the goal setting, I think, and just to drawing this to a close with it in terms of, it's dead easy to have non-specific goals, whether it's personal or professional. And then by the time we get to it at the end of the year, it's like, how do I know? Have I actually done anything, done anything that's of value, that's measurable, that's had an impact in the way I want it to? I'm going to get to the end of this year. Most of mine are leadership based. Most of mine are about the outcomes of students, in my department. So I've got to work backwards to go, what do I need to put in place for my staff, for my team, and how do I keep them motivated? How do I keep them on task? And how do I then ensure that they're going in the right path? And if they're not, support them, moving them on to the right one, but not just telling them, allowing them to figure it out for themselves. And that is the biggest challenge, I think, for it.
I agree.
That's your final take. Just you agree?
No. Yeah. There was a lot there. Sorry. What I would say in that is that I think I do agree. Yeah, I do agree. Especially when I'm looking at it from a leadership point of view. You're looking at it from a leadership point of view. I think a lot of our targets for the end of the year would be very similar. We are looking to get these outcomes from our team. I like to think of it as, could part of my goal then be, how do I support that? Yeah. And it's more of a, as we said, to bring it right back full circle, how can I not only facilitate the students in my class, but how can I facilitate the members of my team to facilitate their class? Agreed. Awesome. What a talk. Thanks for that. Welcome. What a day back.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the International Classroom. We hope you found our tips and strategies for goal setting helpful and insightful, and that you feel inspired to set your own goals and work towards achieving them. Remember, setting goals is just the first step towards success. It takes commitment, focus, and hard work to turn your goals into reality. But by taking small, actionable steps towards your objectives every day, you can make progress towards your aspirations and achieve the success you deserve. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode and any goals you've set for yourself as an international teacher. Connect with us on social media or leave a comment to join the conversation. Thank you for tuning in, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast for more insights and tips for educators in the UAE. Until next time, keep setting goals, stay motivated, and continue to make a positive impact on the lives of your students.